talk about their bit. Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. A couple of things to just update you on the top. As we've discussed previously in this room, the President and the administration are making the case directly to the country about the need to pass the rescue plan so we can finish the job and get $2,000 into the pockets of working families, so we can reopen schools safely, and so we can get economic relief to struggling Americans and communities. As part of that work, the President, the Vice President, and Treasury Secretary Yellen will meet this afternoon with business leaders to discuss the vital role that the American Rescue Plan will play in saving our economy and getting Americans back to work. Private sector leaders understand how important it is, and we've seen calls from across the political spectrum, from leading business groups to labor and progressive lawmakers, for Congress to act quickly in getting additional economic relief out the door. These calls have been echoed by leading experts and economists who have praised the plan, including top economic advisors to the last four presidents, both Democrat and Republican. And analysis after analysis has shown that the economic cost of inaction would be incredibly painful for the American people, something we saw last Friday with the latest month of weak job numbers. But they also know that we have a way to help workers and get our economy back by passing the rescue plan. So a couple of pieces of economic data you all may have seen. A CBO projection last week found that it would take the economy 4 years to bounce back and return to full employment without the rescue plan. Studies by the Brookings Institution and Moody's Analytics found that the economy could recover from the pandemic and return to full employment by the beginning of next year if the rescue plan is enacted. Moody's also found that passing the rescue plan would double economic growth, returning the economy to full employment a full year faster. A couple of other updates from our COVID team. You may have also seen this. Jeff Zients, the COVID coordinator, made a few announcements earlier this afternoon. Today, we announced the launch of our Federal Quality Health Centers, FQHC, vaccination program. Community health centers provide primary care services in underserved areas, reaching almost 30 million people. Under this new program, we will begin directly sending vaccine supply to community health centers, enabling them to vaccinate more of the people they serve, alongside other efforts like mobile health units and community vaccination centers. This announcement is another tool we are providing to state and local leaders in their work to reach underserved and hardest hit populations. Importantly, this program grew in part out of a suggestion from House committee chairs that the President had, of course, had a meeting with them on Friday, but even discussions prior to that. And he informed them during a call this morning that this program would be rolled out. Let's see, last few pieces. We also announced another increase in weekly vaccine allocations to states, tribes, and territories, bringing us up to 11 million doses. So overall, this after weekly increases the past 2 weeks, and it's a net 28% increase to states since we entered government. These announcements convey our steady drumbeat of progress and action by the federal government and our whole of government pandemic response. The President also will meet with members of the COVID response team in the Oval Office today to discuss their work and the next steps in shutting down the virus and getting American life back to normal. Last thing, I've noted a number of times, and some of you have asked about our progress and efforts on confirmations. We're pleased to see Dennis McDonough confirmed last night with 87 yes votes as the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and he, of course, is being sworn in today. We also would just like to reiterate the importance of getting our nominee, the President's nominee, to lead the Department of Education, Miguel Cardona, confirmed, obviously at a time where the American people are focused on the reopening of schools, focused on doing that safely. This is a step that Congress could take. He's obviously a pivotal and key partner in ensuring we can get that done swiftly and safely. With that, Alex, let's kick it off.
Thanks, Erin. I wanted to ask you off the top about the attempted hacking and poisoning of the Oldsmar, Florida water supply. Does the White House have any details on who committed the hacking, and is there any plan for review of water supply stations across the nation, or an effort to shore up the cybersecurity measures at those stations?
Well, as was announced earlier today, the FBI and the Secret Service, of course, are undergoing an investigation. That's something we'd certainly defer to them on any specific details of their findings of that investigation. I will say, broadly speaking, that the president, the vice president, members of our national security team are focused on elevating cybersecurity as a threat that has only increased over the past several years. That's why they've made it an across government focus on why he has elevated positions in the White House and other parts of our government.
And then can you share any details on the president's visit to the Department of Defense? What will he be discussing with
Sure.
Secretary Austin?
Sure. The president will visit the Pentagon tomorrow, where he will thank the men and women serving our country and keeping the American people safe. As the first president in 40 years with a child who served in the military, he has a personal connection to the important role of the work of the military, the men and women who serve. He will also discuss the vital role of the Department of Defense in our national security, talk about the significance of having the first African-American Secretary of Defense in history leading the department. The visit has special resonance coming during Black History Month. Over 40% of active duty forces are men and women of color, and you will hear President Biden pay special tribute to the rich history of Black service members tomorrow.
Any new policy rollouts tomorrow, or is it just?
He will certainly, as I noted, talk about the important role of the Defense Department in our national security, but we will have more to share about that as we get closer to his visit. Go ahead. Oh, let's go. Jeff Reuters, I promised you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Can you tell us how the CEOs were chosen for today's meeting with President Biden? I see some diversity in that group, which isn't always common at the top echelons of corporate America. Was that one of the factors?
Far too uncommon, yes.
Is that one of the factors, and how did you go about choosing them?
Well, first, I would expect that this is the first of many engagements the president will have directly with leaders from the business community. And this was an opportunity to speak directly with some who are major employers in the country, some who are leading the Business Roundtable or other organizational kind of business groups where they speak to many business leaders across the country. So this was an opportunity to have a smaller meeting. It's only about half a dozen, as you know, and discussion about the American Rescue Plan, how it will impact workers and American families, and how they can work together to get people back on their feet.
Specifically, Walmart and JP Morgan, what is the president's ask of those types of companies for this?
I wouldn't look at it through that prism, Jeff. I would look at it as a conversation with leaders who have, Walmart is, of course, one of the biggest employers in the country and states across the country. Obviously, Jamie Dimon is somebody who has been in the business sector for many, many years. So it's more of a discussion about the country and the economic downturn that we've gone through. The president wants to lay out all of the specifics of his plan, hear feedback from them, as he has with many different groups over the past couple of weeks.
Just one other econ-related question. Did the White House ask OMB Director nominee Neera Tanden to apologize to Republicans in her testimony this morning? And how confident are you about that nomination now?
Well, the president wouldn't nominate anyone he wasn't confident could get confirmed and didn't deserve the consideration and confirmation of Senate Democrats and Republicans. We certainly did not ask her to make any specific comments in her testimony today. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you, Jen. A couple of questions on the impeachment and the COVID package that President Biden is proposing. First, on impeachment. Today there's going to be a debate over the constitutionality of the process, whether it's constitutional to try to remove from office a former president. Does President Biden have any concerns that this trial could set a dangerous precedent for the institution of the presidency?
Well, President Biden, we put out a statement following the conclusion of the House vote just a couple of weeks ago, and he made clear in that statement that he felt the process should proceed as history, and many laws predetermine, and he is going to wait for the Senate to determine the outcome of this. But his view is that his role should be currently focused on addressing the needs of the American people, putting people back to work, addressing the pandemic.
Does he see it as constitutional?
I don't think that's for me or us to opine on. Obviously, he said that the process should proceed, and it's doing exactly that.
And what Let me ask you, as millions of people tune in to watch this trial, presumably throughout the week, they're going to see the former president's lawyers argue, based on the briefs that they have filed, that some Democrats have used incendiary rhetoric. They are going to point to Representative Maxine Waters, for example, who in 2018 called on supporters at a rally to confront and at one point harassed Trump officials over their support of the child separation policy, the zero tolerance policy. That's something that Cedric Richmond said she had a constitutional right to express those views. So how does the White House view that as any different?
Look, Joe Biden is the president. He's not a pundit. He's not going to opine on the back and forth arguments, nor is he watching them that are taking place in the Senate.
Okay, let me ask you about the COVID relief package. Yesterday, the Ways and Means Committee Democrats proposed limiting the $1,400 direct payments to those making $75,000 or less. Is that something that President Biden supports? And does he have any concerns that progressives might not be on board with that?
Well, the president has conveyed from the beginning of this discussion that he's open to having a discussion about the thresholds. He has been firm in his resolve that Americans should be made whole on the $2,000 checks, which of course would mean maintaining his firmness on the $1,400 checks, right? But there's been a discussion about the thresholds and what those should look like. And he doesn't feel that families making over $250,000 a year should be the target of this relief. But there is a scale up, right? And even in the recent negotiations from the 75 and from the 150, it's just will reach a certain top thresholds where people would not receive relief.
So, but has he determined whether he would support that? Does he support 75,000 as being the threshold?
It's not the threshold. That's kind of who would receive the maximum amount. There is then a scale up beyond that. These negotiations are ongoing. We certainly support the discussions as they're happening, and certainly his view is that he's open to the discussion about making them more targeted and ensuring that people who need relief the most receive the relief. Go ahead.
I had a couple, but I wanted to follow up on something Jeff asked, which
Okay.
is Jamie Dimon is among those participants, and there's been complaints both that big banks like JP Morgan have made it difficult for small businesses, minority businesses to access PPP loans, and lots of data that shows recently big banks have been scaling back consumer lending and instead buying government securities. And so I know that this is kind of a cheerleading event for the president's legislative package, but is he going to raise either of those issues with Jamie Dimon when he has the opportunity?
Well, the president does not have a litmus test that he gives people before he meets with them in the Oval Office. Otherwise, he would not have met with 10 Republicans last week. So they don't agree with him on everything. I'm sure the business leaders would convey that to you. He doesn't agree with them on everything. But this is really a discussion about the American Rescue Plan, a plan that will help spark economic growth, help put people back to work, help get our economy on a path to recovery, and hopefully that's something they can all agree on.
And I know that you guys have put together a task force to look at domestic extremism following what happened in January, but there's been a lot of reporting about the breakdowns that have happened in the government ahead of that, coordination between DHS and the FBI and Capitol Police. So I'm wondering, especially as there's chatter indicating that there might be further sort of demonstrations surrounding the election, what, if anything, the administration is doing to
Surrounding which election? Sorry, I'm just trying to follow you.
the past one.
The past one.
Yes.
Okay.
There's been online chatter that there's going to be another demonstration in March here in Washington. My point is the administration doing anything to look at the kind of breakdown that happened within law enforcement and the federal government ahead of January 6th to make sure that it's not replicated in the future?
Well, I think one of the steps we took was the president named a head of Homeland Security in the White House, a role that did not exist in the prior administration, who can serve in a coordinating role to ensure that we are in touch with state and local authorities and officials, something that wasn't happening at a pace and with a level of coordination that should have happened in the last administration. We obviously came into office, or the president came into office, and our entire national security team did at a time of heightened alert, even on the day of the inauguration and following. So I would say we certainly are not looking to the past administration as a model, and we are charting our own path to make sure we do things differently.
And lastly, the World Health Organization said today that it was extremely unlikely that the coronavirus escaped the lab in Wuhan. And I'm just wondering, especially now that we've sort of resumed our participation in the WHO, if the administration agrees with that assessment.
Yeah, we have obviously seen those reports, as I mean the public reporting on it. We're looking forward to receiving the report and the data from the WHO investigation. We haven't looked at the data specifically ourselves, so we'd like to do that. We've expressed our concerns regarding the need for full transparency and access from China and the WHO to all information regarding the earliest days of the pandemic, but we weren't involved directly in the implementation of this investigation. And again, we'll just look forward to reviewing the findings in detail. Go ahead. Oh, we'll come back to you, Caitlin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Two questions on schools. You opened up talking about reopening schools as being a priority for the administration. Are there any discussions within the administration of providing these kind of rapid tests that are being produced by Illum and other companies to help that move quicker, to get those tests to local school systems within the states?
Well, our focus really at this point in time is waiting for the CDC guidelines to come out and give schools across the country, school districts across the country, the first medical and scientific recommendations and guidelines that have been given from the federal level. And obviously, once those are put out publicly and concluded, we will look for ways to work with states to ensure that schools are getting the resources they need. That's part of why we proposed funding in the American Rescue Plan, but we want to wait to see what the health and medical experts have in those guidelines to ensure we're directing those resources in the right way or working with states to do exactly that.
Secondly, on President Biden's transgender rights executive action, specifically when it applies to high school sports, what message would the White House have for trans girls and cis girls who may end up competing against each other and sparking some lawsuits and some concern among parents? So does the administration have guidance for schools on dealing with disputes arising over trans girls competing against and with cis girls?
I'm not sure what your question is.
The president's executive order had...
I'm familiar with the order, but what was your question about it?
My question is, does the president have a message for local school officials on dealing with these kind of disputes that are already starting to arise between, trans girls who are competing and cis girls in a level playing field, particularly in high school sports when it leads to college scholarships? Is there any kind of messaging or clarification that the White House wants to give on the executive order?
I would just say that the president's belief is that trans rights are human rights, and that's why he signed that executive order. And in terms of the determinations by universities and colleges, I would certainly defer to them. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Caitlin, go ahead. Go ahead, and then we go to the back. Go ahead.
It's okay, I don't mind when you call me. I have 3 quick questions. One on what Democrats have put forward with these stimulus checks. It's not changing the income cap. So instead of limiting it from the $75,000 to get the full $1,400, that's staying where it is. President Biden had said he was open to targeting that. So did he sign off on what the Democrats have now put forward?
You mean where the cap stops or where the threshold stops at the top?
The cap stops for the full $1,400. Right now it's $75,000 as opposed to $50,000 or what others like Joe Manchin had proposed. So did he sign off on the latest proposal from them yesterday?
Well, his proposal was originally 75, right, and 150. And he's open to targeting, which it still will be targeted, because it's about the question of what the threshold goes up to, right? Because prior, in earlier proposals, it had a higher threshold where it went up to a higher income level for families where they would get some version of a check, not the $1,400, right? But a smaller version. So
he's fine with not bringing down that cap at the $75,000 to a $50,000 like others.
he supports that. Where the status of the negotiations is at this point, yes, of the $75,000.
Okay, my second question is, we had the acting attorney general ask all of the Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys to resign from their post, with the exception of 2, the one overseeing the beginnings of the Russia probe and the one overseeing Hunter Biden's tax probe. Can you comment on that?
As you know, this has been commonplace among previous administrations, and we look forward to working with the Senate to swiftly fill these openings in the coming weeks. The president has also made clear that he wants to restore the independence of the Department of Justice and to ensure it remains free of any undue political influence. That will be helped when our Attorney General is, of course, confirmed. But the decision to leave 2 U.S. attorneys in their roles is a reflection of that commitment.
Okay, so he had no conversations with the acting Attorney General about the 2 who remained in their post?
In what way? You mean who would leave?
President Biden didn't have any did he have any conversations with the acting Attorney General about leaving the U.S. Attorney in Delaware and Connecticut in their post?
These were decisions that were made in order to fulfill his promise of maintaining independence and ensuring that he sent that message in every action that was taken.
Okay, and my last question, I know you said the president is not a pundit. I think we all agree with that, understand that, but he is the first president to be in office and have a former president, his predecessor, go and face an impeachment trial just on the street. So how can he not weigh in on whether or not it's constitutional, given he is the current office holder, and the questions of what precedent this sets and whether or not he agrees that it's constitutional?
Well, again, this is obviously a big story in the country. No one's denying that here, and there's certainly going to be a lot of attention and focus on it. But our focus and the president's focus is on putting people back to work, getting the pandemic under control, and that means we're not going to weigh in on every question about the impeachment trial, and we don't feel it's necessary or our role to do that.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.